Wonderful. All right, so I want to thank everyone who's here so much for joining us. This will be the first of a series of leadership summits hosted by the Great Wardens Project. And if you are just hearing about the Great Wardens Project, we'll talk a little bit about what that is. I do want to acknowledge, though, that the past, it feels like either 10 years or 2 months, depending on who you ask, but the past couple years have been really, really challenging. And I would imagine particularly folks in corrections have been feeling the brunt, the weight of the challenges that we've all been facing. And now is a time, especially, that great leadership is really needed. So I'm really excited that we have an esteemed panelist of experts here to talk about the fundamentals of leadership and management. And so, yeah, thank you so much. Let's go ahead and get started. So the Great Wardens Project is a project that was created to provide opportunities for wardens to connect with each other in the interest of creating culture change. And so our mission is to provide mentorship and training to develop bold prison leaders and build a corrections culture based on safety and dignity. We have a couple core beliefs. One of them, that wardens and superintendents have a responsibility to promote safe, secure, and healthy corrections facilities. And finally, that advocates and prison leaders can work together to reimagine how corrections facilities operate and change a new generation of committed corrections professionals. I want to go over just a couple tech things. I know many of us are probably really familiar with Zoom, but just in case, the bottom of your screen should have a little bar that looks like this one right here. If you want to go ahead and mute yourself if you're not speaking, the mute button is right there. Go ahead and unmute yourself if you have a question. We will be having some time afterwards for Q&A. If you do have video capability and you want to turn that on, the button right there is for that. It's not necessary, but we love to see your faces. If you have any questions or anything that you want to add to the conversation, please feel free to use the chat function. We will be keeping track of all the questions that come through.
Yeah, operation read option, please. Thank you. All right, I was glad you came up with some suggestions because we're not there.
We've got welcome to whoever just joined us. Let's go ahead and there we go. Awesome, thank you. So yeah, if you have any questions, please go ahead and put them in the chat. We will be keeping track of them and saving them for the end, and hopefully we'll have a good amount of time to go over questions. So the Great Wardens Project is what it is because of our wonderful task force, many of whom are here on this call right now, some of whom are here in spirit. And as you can see, they are representing the country left and right, up and down, top and center. And we're so grateful to have this amazing group of leaders here to talk about their experiences, their lessons learned, and to hopefully inspire all of us. I do want to give a shout out to those of us on the task force that are going to be participating in our conversation this morning. To our folks, if you wouldn't mind just introducing yourself, where you're calling from, and a little bit about why you're on the Great Wardens Project. And I'll play teacher here and assign you all an order. Mr. Aldridge, why don't you go ahead and start?
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. I'm calling from just west of Richmond, Virginia. Been with the Department of Corrections for about a little over 25 years. First male warden in Virginia. Quite an experience to work with the female population. Probably I would consider that my greatest growing experience in my career. Spent 5 years with the female population, and really that's why I got on to JDI. Is that inmate wrote in some favorable words about me, and some colleagues spoke favorably of me. And what I like to just ensure happens is I'll just leave it as a little quote or story by Ralph Waldo Emerson that I like to live by and treat others. And that is, you treat people as they are, they remain as they are. you treat people as they could be, they will become what they should be. Thank you.
Thank you. Love that you're bringing some poetry in here. Love it. All right, next we have Mr. Capper. Would you introduce yourself, please?
Well, good afternoon, everyone. My video isn't that great. It keeps coming in and out, so I will spare you that. But I'm Mike Capper. I'm the superintendent of Sing Sing Correctional Facility here in New York City. We are the closest maximum security facility to the New York City area. I've been in the department for over 40 years and 10 years as a superintendent here. I think this project's going to open up some eyes on just opening up the communication between wardens and superintendents, looking at how we manage our population and really how we make positive impact on both our staff and the prison population and incarcerated individuals. I think at the end of the day, I look at myself as a person who should be getting a report card on what the recidivism rate is for my facility. And I think collectively, we all throughout the country really should be looking at how we make positive impacts on the people who are incarcerated, so they are different people once they leave and they never come back to our system. So throughout the years, we've all picked up a number of different skill sets and educational experiences that I think we could share with one another. And I'm just looking forward to hearing the dialogue with everybody. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Next, we have Ms. Dawn Davidson. Introduce yourself, please.
Well, good morning, everybody. Here I am in California, so it is 10 o'clock in the morning here, or thereabouts. My name is Dawn Davidson. I'm the former warden of a women's prison. And like Eric said, working with women is a terrific learning experience. I'm pleased to say that I was one of a group of people that came up with the concept of the Great Wardens Project, sorry. And I never in my wildest dreams believed what it would have become. So I'm very grateful for JDI from taking it from a very small seed of an idea to what we can bring to wardens and superintendents across the United States. I'm really happy to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Mr. Page. Could you please introduce yourself?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I'm Joe Page. I'm a superintendent in Arkansas Department of Corrections over the Pine Bluff Complex. I have 4 units under my supervision at this site. I personally believe that the Great Wardens Project is going to help, not just with dialogue, but nowadays when people promote, a lot of people are promoting out. And when I say promoting out, they're retiring, they're going home. So there's not a lot of mentorship for new wardens. And I saw that through the ranks of deputy warden. And I believe in the project of what we're doing of creating that resource for new wardens to feel comfortable. So some of them might not make it to the NAWS conference or ACA conference and get to meet people like Mel Williams and others that I have in my career that we dialogue and have conversations about. But this will give them a platform to where they're not feeling judged or anything like that. They can ask a question and one of us has dealt with it, or it just creates that camaraderie so that way they can help them better serve their people. So I believe in the mission of what we're doing, and I'm glad to be a part of it.
Thank you so much. And finally, Mr. Mel Williams.
Yeah, hi, Mel Williams. I'm the Executive Director of the North American Wardens and Superintendents Association. I'm glad to see we have several NAWS members online today. The last few years, NAWS has been reaching out to different organizations, expanding our knowledge and our experience. And it was my pleasure about, Jessica, was it 2.5 years now, to meet you and Tara at the Washington Airport and talk about how NAWS and Just Detention can work together. I'm sure there was some feelings out there among wardens of what are we talking to advocates for? There's no doubt there was some feelings, but overall the reception from NAWS members has been very good. We really need to reach out to advocates. We all share the same space. We think we share the same ideas, although sometimes other people are a little more radical, I think, a little bit left-leaning than perhaps some of the conservative wardens, but In fact, we're all talking about the same thing. We're talking about the health and welfare of staff and inmates inside a prison and how we can make it better for everyone. So it's certainly my pleasure to be here today to talk to all of you, and happy to see you all, and looking forward to going forward with the Great Wardens Project. And thanks for the opportunity.
Wonderful, thank you. And last but not least, me. My name is Jessica Serrano-Seifel. I'm a senior program director with Just Detention International. I'm one of those advocates. I'm hopefully not too scary. I'm also really excited to be here. And I think as an advocate, it's really interesting to be able to learn from the wardens that are on this project because it helps me better understand, and I pass it on to the advocates that I know to better understand the full scope of challenges that wardens and superintendents are facing. So the objectives for our summit are here. We want to kind of explore the differences between managing and leading a facility. We want to review some strategies for effective management, strong leadership. At the end, we hope that everyone here feels inspired to create a facility vision based on whatever your leadership goals are. And then, of course, to learn real world examples of leadership in practice, which is why we have this panel here. So I think back in the spring, I forget exactly when, NAS sent out a survey on behalf of the Great Wardens Project. Some of the folks that are here may have filled that out. One of the questions on that survey was, different topics that wardens and superintendents were really interested in learning more about. And these right here were the top 3. And as you can see, the differences between leading and facility and managing one are right here. And that's why we've chosen this topic, because folks in the field are clearly wanting to sort of dissect this a little more. These other 2 topics right here, developing a facility vision, getting buy-in from staff, we hope to really tackle those in a future leadership summit. So this will be the first of a series, and you'll get to save the date for when the next one will be, and hopefully we'll see you again. So because we know that wardens and superintendents in the field want to learn more about the differences between leadership and management, from an outside perspective, my first question was, why is that? What is it about the differences between leadership and management that folks really want to dissect and learn more about? And I'm wondering if any of my great wardens on our task force maybe have some insight into why they think that might be. Any thoughts?
Well, I think just personally in my experience, some wardens try to do everything, both lead and manage, and that's really a hard job. And for me, the key is to cultivate, utilize your staff under you so your managers can do just that. They can manage. So then you as the warden or superintendent have to have confidence in yourself that you can let go of the day-to-day intricacies, not let go of the day-to-day altogether, because we certainly can never take our eye off of that. But the little intricacies, such as signing post orders or making sure the lock is there and works, those little intricacies you can let go of and concentrate on what you feel is the vision for your facility. That's really where leadership comes in. And I always say, trust, but verify. Now, how do you do that? So if you're letting go of the little everyday intricacies, there's got to be a way that you make sure that things are still getting done. And the way you do that is by getting out there, walking and talking to the staff, to the incarcerated population, especially the staff that you don't get to see every day, which are your managers, I assume. It was for me. So that's how you verify that what they're telling you is really happening, that the lock is getting locked, that the post orders are getting signed, and so on and so forth. So you ensure your expectations are being met by getting out and walking around and talking.
Great, thank you. Any other thoughts on that?
I think as we come up through the ranks, we're all trained to be managers. We manage operations, whether it's security or administration or programs or community or release. All of us are taught to manage a system. The difference being now, is now if you're the warden or superintendent, you're the person in charge. You're the person that has to lead the facility. You're no longer the manager that manages as an operation. You're the leader of all the entire facility and everything in it. So you really need to lead instead of manage. You know, we're trained to manage, and some warden superintendents can go through their career and be managers and be good managers. But in order to lead, you have to have, like Dawn said, you have to have a vision. You have to have a plan. You need to know where you're going and what you want to accomplish. Of course, we're all limited by our central office policies and procedures. That's an understanding, and that goes with management. In order to lead, we have to be the person out front, the person that people know and see in the facility and around the facility, taking care of business and giving people a vision of where they want to go and how they can care about their staff.
Great. Thank you.
I could springboard off of both my colleagues by saying, as we've come up through the ranks, as I have, I know as Mel has, we're in the same state agency. You know, we were taught to be managers, and I think at one point, as we become appointed people and become executive level people, I don't know that anybody ever stops you and says, "Hey, what is your vision? What do you see? How do you make your facility a better place? How do you make a positive impact on both the staff and the vision that you have for your incarcerated people?" I just think the conversation that we're now having, I think the world is changing. The expectations that the public has on what we do inside our correction facilities is now becoming very transparent, opposed to what it was back in the 80s and 70s. And so, healthier place, I think we're going in the right direction. I think we have to not only expect that our managers, wardens, superintendents to think outside the box, but also to know that, you know, the responsibility is for each one of us to come up with the vision for what our facility looks like now and what we want it to look like. And as we go through the months, the years, to be able to come up with some kind of a system that we know we're moving forward. And it's not easy. The change of culture, for instance, as an example, in my facility, educational facility, and education was not a cool thing with the inmate population. We had over 1,700 inmates here. It was for, you know, the weak guys and things of that nature. And over the years, because of the amount of attention we've given to it, because of the amount of people we were able to bring to the facility, different, you know, public entities, a number of different things that we've done over the years that really have layered one thing on top of another. It is now the thing to do for the incarcerated people here at my facility. And now that the staff have buy, it is not an easy thing to do to change any kind of culture. And I'm not going to be the one to sit here and tell you that we're, you know, 1,000% everybody's all in. But I'll tell you that it is an expectation that most of the population knows if you get through vocational, or if you can't do a vocational, get into an educational. If you can't get into educational, get into vocational, because we're going to give you a lot of positive reinforcement. So that's just an example. I think we do have to come up with these ideas. I don't think we're inherently, especially most of the people who made it to ward and superintendent, most of the folks, you know, you all have a lot of time in this job. I just wonder how many of you have really thought about coming up with your own vision for your facility and what you think it should look like.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I think the first part of this conversation really requires sort of unpacking, you know, qualities of leaders that you emulate, right? So no one gets to where they are, the position that you all are in, without having mentors, like leaders who inspired you, whether that's professionally or otherwise. In the chat, if folks wouldn't mind just sharing some of the qualities of leaders that they emulate. So who are, you know, some of those leaders that inspired you, again, professionally, personally, either way, and what qualities about them do you sort of try to do in your own version of leadership?
Is it open or?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm hoping we get some folks in the chat to chime in. And oh, here we already started here. Integrity, empathy, competence. Love it. And I know, first and foremost, loyal, objective, honest, wise, transparent. These are some words that are going to come up again later. Humility. Humility is a good one. Willing to listen, yes. When we were, sort of preparing to have this conversation, Mel, you shared a story about handshaking. I forget if it was Harold or Henry, but it was an H name. And I just thought that it was a really good illustration of this idea of, a quality that you saw in a leader that maybe at first challenged you. But then as you grew in your own leadership, you started to sort of see why that person did that. So would you mind sharing the handshake, whoever story? Please remind me the name.
I don't mind. We call him Handshaking Harold. I was an officer at Attica Corrections Facility. I started there the year after the riot that killed 43 people. And as you can imagine, it was a pretty tough place. Of course, we were the new officers. We were going to fix and change everything. And every day, the superintendent made rounds. His name was Superintendent Harold Smith, truly a great man. But what we didn't understand is every day he came around, he'd meet all the staff, shake their hands, and then he'd go meet the inmates and shake their hands too. So our nickname was Handshaking Harold. And I really had no appreciation of what he was up to. I'm saying, what is this guy? He's the superintendent. He's supposed to be up front. What is he shaking our hand? And what he's doing shaking the inmates' hands? That's crazy stuff. It wasn't until much later in my career that I realized he was a great man. We had so much trouble at that place. So many people had died. So many people were assaulted. He actually smoothed the whole thing out with his style of leadership. His leadership was going to the facility every single day, every day, and talk to as many staff and as many inmates as possible. But as an officer, I didn't get it. And nobody else did either until later on. We started figuring this out that the guy was a genius. He was something very simple about going into the prison every single day by himself, letting people see him. He'd go into the yard, he'd go down to the cell blocks, sit down and talk to staff and inmates there.
Put our very limited resources.
Oh, welcome to whoever joined us. If you wouldn't mind muting yourself, thank you.
His secret, which I try to emulate because I thought he's such a great leader, is get out there every day. Get out there, talk to everybody. Talk to inmates, talk to staff. Don't be afraid to shake their hand. Don't be afraid to put your hand on your shoulder. Show empathy. You don't have to fear. You don't have to have that great separation because everybody already knows who you are. They know you're the superintendent or the warden. So that's not a problem. You don't have to define that by keeping yourself separate. You can go right in there and talk to them. I try to emulate as much as I can. He was truly a great man, Harold Smith.
Handshake Harold, yeah. I'm going to remember that story for a while. The alliteration is nice, yes. Thank you. So let's first, before we get into the deep dive about leadership, let's talk about management and what makes managers so effective. Most leaders go through sort of an experience of management before they get to a leadership position. This is not sort of an exhaustive list by any means, but generally speaking, managers sort of need to have at least these 4 qualities or these 4 responsibilities. The first, of course, being the day-to-day operations, right? So managers need to identify the resources that are needed. They need to anticipate what might be needed, along the way. And as Don mentioned earlier, wardens and superintendents have to understand the day-to-day operations intimately, but also have to be able to entrust their managers to be responsible for those operations. Managers also, take policies, procedures that are provided from wardens or from administrative leadership, and have to translate those into practices. They are sort of the key to ensuring that policies are understood and that they're followed, right? They have a keen insight into what is and isn't working, and should be encouraged to share those insights with their leadership. They're also sort of the front line of supervising and supporting staff on the ground. Managers need to be cognizant, aware of how their staff are doing, what support is needed. And obviously, leaders are also responsible for that as well. But, managers are so frequently the go-to, right, for for staff if there's a problem. And then finally, to execute the leader's vision, right? So if the leader sets a vision, managers are sort of the folks that work to execute that. Leaders are going to set the expectation, and managers translate that into sort of what is expected of folks. Some of the things that we've already talked about, are about how to support managers. And one of those is delegating appropriately. And Don, earlier on, you had mentioned, going out and talking to folks out on the yard. And I imagine that takes up a lot of time, right? I've seen that in action. I've been in facilities with you where people kind of swarm you and they want to talk to you. So I imagine that takes away from some of the other duties that wardens and superintendents are responsible for. What about delegating is so important that allows you to be able to take the time to be out in the yard like that?
Well, it's important that a warden or superintendent trusts their managers. And like I said before, trust but verify. So if you are not a real confident warden or superintendent, I have found that you tend to micromanage. And micromanagement is not a good thing, because it ties you up with those intricacies that I was talking about earlier. Now, if you get out and you trust but verify, and you verify that you have managers that are not living up to their expectations, well, that's a whole different story. Not that it's easy, but that's what we have progressive discipline for, because you need, as a warden or a superintendent, to trust and delegate appropriately. They've got to be able to manage so you can lead. And you have the responsibility of setting up a vision for your facility that your managers know are your priorities, the incarcerated population knows are your priorities. Now, this vision can be created with their input and should be created with their input, but you've got to trust your staff so you can get out. You can trust but verify. You can have the time to take to come up with this vision for the facility, because you don't want to be stagnant. You don't want to be where you are now. You want to inspire so that people always feel that you're moving along, that your facility can be better. And that's up to you as a leader.
Yeah. And you mentioned trust, and there's a lot of different ways to build trust. Consistency, transparency, all of these sorts of qualities that were mentioned earlier. But there's also a really strong emotional component to trust that I think can easily get overlooked. And Mr. Page, when we were, having conversations, getting this presentation started, you talked about the emotional bank, which kind of blew my mind. I had never thought of, that sort of relationship building that way. I wonder if you could share a little bit about what the emotional bank is and sort of what it looks like when you're out interacting with staff.
Yes, the emotional bank was something that John Maples, one of my mentors that was a warden in Texas for 30 years, and then he came to Arkansas and promoted me to deputy warden. And the way he explained it to me was that you're making deposits. And I was a psychology major before I switched to law, so I knew where he was going with it, but I never thought of it in that way. And all of us do this in our own way, but this particular terminology might help it become more, relatable. Basically, everybody's a bank account that you come in contact with, and as simple as the hellos and the how you doings and the being there for them, or like I do kind of a sick and shut in list like church. I've been doing that since I was deputy warden. I call when I know someone's out for more than a couple of days. I make sure my secretary keeps that list, and we call them weekly. And then I speak to them every week until they come back to work. And that helps me make those deposits. Those deposits might be $20 deposits. The how you doing might be $1 deposit. But what's inevitable in what we do? Mistakes are gonna happen. Somebody's gonna get in trouble. But the more deposits you make with these people, when you have to address something because that's part of our job, the part that I don't like and a lot of us don't like, but it's what we have to do. If they have $500 of credit with me, and I might have had to make a withdrawal of $200 because something happened, I'm still not in overdraft protection. and I've taken it and ran with it. So it's no matter how tired I am, I try to start the day with the hellos and how you doing. And then if I see someone sitting there looking like something's going on in mind, not trying to be Dr. Phil or anything, but I just, hey, how things going? Are you doing okay? Whether they're going to tell me or not, that's a positive notch in their dealing with me. I can't control what they think about me or want to think about me, but I control what I put out there. So all I put out there is the positive, and all of you wardens, you know what I'm talking about. No matter how nice of a man or woman you are, there's going to be a group of people at a unit that are going to find, I don't like the way she wears her skirt on that day, or I don't like the way he wore black shoes and a brown belt. There's going to be someone, for some of the pettiest reasons, that's that hateful and discontentful group of employees. They try to find those things that you just can't be perfect. So from my standpoint, I just try to communicate and have positive interactions, because prison, all of our people we have in prison, they're not there because, you know, they were going to church too much or praying too much. They're not all bad people. Some of them really need to be in prison, but a lot of them, they just had a bad run with the law after they graduated college or whatever the story was. But the more positive times you can see your staff, and when they see Warden Williams is positive, Warden Jessica is positive, then when Miss Jessica has to deal with you because you don't normally get in trouble, but you kind of got in trouble this time and a verbal warning is not going to suffice, you can have ownership of it because Jessica's talked to you every day she saw you. She's never walked past you and let her feelings dictate how she deals with you. So when you go to her office, you're not, oh, I'm on the carpet feeling, oh, I'm going to the big lady's office. No, she can address you with it. You can take ownership and you can move past it and take your discipline and not happen again. So that's the emotional bank in a simplest form. Create as much positive contact as you can with your employees that you control. So that way, when you have to deal with something that was out of your control, you're not in overdraft protection. Because overdraft protection is when people are mad, you're leaving, you know, nothing you say to them is right, you know, that situation. So that's my little 2 cents on that.
I love it. I love it. I mean, you're talking about like literally making an investment, right, in the people around you, in your relationships. I think that's a really really like easy way to really understand that sort of give and take that that is required to build that trust. Absolutely. So we've talked a little bit about managers. Now let's focus on leadership. And again, this is not an exhaustive list by any means. I think the thing that makes leadership a little more difficult is that it's less tangible, right? If management is a science, then leadership is an art, right? And art is always sort of in the eye of the beholder, right? But there are some things I think, you know, that we understand are qualities that all leaders have. It was already mentioned, you know, honesty and integrity is crucial to getting people to believe you and to buy into the journey that you're taking them on, right? Communication keeps your team informed of the journey, where you are, where you stand, where they're headed. It helps to build trust, as Jill mentioned. Leaders are known for their ability to inspire others, right? This is especially challenging in a prison environment. We'll talk a little bit about that as well. But we know that no one is inspired by pessimism or cynicism. Those are feelings that have never gotten anyone out of bed to try to accomplish something, right? Optimism, hope, those are the things that inspire people. Leaders are the ultimate challengers, right? Leaders are never complacent. Leaders do not accept things the way they are, right? They are driven by what's possible. They can see the change, right, that they want to enact. And that's part of what is so inspiring about a good leader, is because they can see what's possible in ways that maybe others can't. And that vision is what drives the change, right? That vision is rooted in a hope for a better future. Again, what can be rather than what is. I think every sort of great idea that we've ever had started off as some cuckoo idea that someone had that no one thought was ever going to be possible, right? And now we have computers, that live in our pockets. I mean, this would have been a wild idea however many years ago, right? Now it's a reality, and that's the vision that leaders have. So I'm going to pop up a little poll for everybody here, and you should see a poll that pops up on your screen right now. This is a question that was posed to folks in the survey I mentioned earlier that was sent out by NAS. So you may have already answered this question, but I'm going to ask it again. So as a warden or superintendent, do you feel empowered to make changes necessary to improve your facility culture? So I'll give folks a little bit just to put in their answers here. All right. I think that I don't know exactly how many folks are here, but yeah, I think that might be everyone. Let's show the results here. Can everyone see that? Okay. Overwhelmingly, folks agree, strongly or otherwise, that they are empowered to make the changes necessary. We have some folks that feel differently. They don't agree strongly or otherwise. How do those results strike my esteemed panelists? How do those results strike you? Any thoughts? Surprising? What you expected?
I can relate. Yeah, I can relate to those who say they strongly disagree. And the reason why I said that, and Mel touched on it earlier, is, as you come up through the ranks, you're really taught to be a manager. And if you're not really thinking outside the box, your function is to run your facility the best you can without really thinking about, geez, what can I do that really enhances what happens here? And I think that's the conversation that needs to be had. What can we do? What are you doing now? What does it look like if I do something better, different, more impactful? How do I engage the population? How do I engage the staff? I know none of us, I just know because I know we're all in the same. I am so short of staff, it's not even funny. I bet you if I polled everybody, they'd say the same thing. We have no staff. My support staff is in critical condition with low. So there's low on everything. We've got enough problems to shake a stick at. But at the same time, we've got to navigate through the problems and really focus on how we want to continue to move forward. And I think we just get caught up in the day-to-day or don't feel like our central office counterparts want us to do anything. But I can tell you from my experiences, once you do something that is above and beyond, it's like a very big thing. And they're like, wow, we didn't think that you could do that. And then, a common response would be, well, I didn't think you wanted me to do it. So and one of the qualities on a good leader is to be brave and wise enough to know when you can and when you can't, and when you should and when you shouldn't. But I get it when people feel that they disagree, that their principles don't give them a lot of maybe what they feel would be the right latitude to make some changes. But I guarantee if they're the right changes, especially in today's world, that will be a brave move to make, whatever that might be on your end, and it will make a positive impact for people.
Thank you.
I agree with Mike. This poll does not surprise me, but what I would want to say is when you're having those problems at your facility, that's exactly when a leader really needs to step up and lead, because your staff and your incarcerated population need somebody to inspire, need somebody to say, you know what, we can make it past the problems. And this is why we're going to work on goals together. Or you might be so short-staffed that you can't enlist some of your staff to help you. Well, that's when you really need to come up with a roadmap. And you may need to do it yourself. And people will follow that. You set the priorities and people will follow. You set the expectations and people will follow because they need that, especially in times of trouble. They need that. I think sometimes as wardens and superintendents, we don't realize the actual power that we have. We have so many pressures coming from underneath us. We have so many pressures coming from above us, but that doesn't mean that you in your facility can change some of the culture just by how you act. Your staff, your incarcerated population need you to be a model so that when you walk out there, they're going to see you calm and collected and going in a direction that they can follow. We really do have a lot of power to influence our own culture in our own facility in spite of the outside or the inside pressures.
Thank you. And as I mentioned earlier, this question was posed via a survey that was sent out to the NAS membership. And this is how folks responded to that survey. It's interesting, it's very similar to how folks responded here today. I always like to see that consistency. But it seems like many people agree that they do feel empowered, and there are some folks that feel differently, that they're not, they do not feel empowered. So let's sort of break down those leadership qualities here, starting with honesty and integrity. And again, you know, we have had several conversations about these issues as we were preparing for this conversation. And before we settled on honesty and integrity, we talked about accountability. And that was a word that was a little controversial. Not everyone loved the use of that word, which prompted Dawn to say the quote that you see on your screen here, that really transparency is the key, more so than accountability. Dawn, I wonder if you wouldn't mind kind of talking a little more about the word accountability not being the right one to use and why transparency and communication is really sort of the goal here.
Well, transparency really happens when you, as the warden or superintendent, get out and walk and talk, when you meet different staff, when you talk to your incarcerated population, especially with staff, you ask them how they're doing and what you can do to help them. That was something that I always did. When I went in and I talked to staff, I always left with, what can I do to help you right now? And strangely enough, when that rapport was built between myself and staff, very few times did I get complaints. And yeah, you really can do this or you can do that. Most often it was, you know, things are going pretty well. And I think that's a testament to the relationship and the rapport that you bring. However, when they do have answers to that question that say, hey, you know, you can help me with X, or you can get me air conditioning, or you can make sure that whatever it may be. Not that I was able to get them air conditioning, but I always got back to them. Because if you don't get back to them, then trust is not built. And that's the same thing with the incarcerated population. If they tell you something, they may not like the answer that you give, because you're not always going to give them an answer that they want, but you give them an answer. So trust is built when you get back to them. You actually become accountable to them. Mm. And when dealing with headquarters, the community, politicians, the same holds true. You follow up on their questions, and then a relationship, a trust relationship is built. So then when something bad goes wrong, because inevitably it's going to, and they want to hold you accountable for that, they've also had a relationship built with you. and they trust that what you tell them is accurate, and they know that you have integrity. So all those things build to accountability. I call this is emotional labor when you go through and you develop these kind of relationships, but they're so important. Like Joe said, then when it comes time, if something bad happens, or you have to hold somebody accountable for behavior, they already know that you're going to treat them fairly based on this relationship that you've established.
Absolutely. You've got insurance to cover the
Right.
fallout of any issues that are coming up. Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely. And one of the things that has come up so many times during this conversation, I think particularly, Don, what you were talking about is how important communication is, right? And it is so important. And we know that there's, formal ways of communicating and informal ways of communicating. And of course, policies, trainings, memorandums, meetings, all of that stuff is crucial, right? Like that's the foundation of how, facilities operate. But there's also so much to be said about informal communication. Rounds have already come up. We've talked about modeling behaviors, modeling the way that you want people to interact with each other. Sometimes meetings are informal, just a really quick, what I might call a hallway meeting, you might call something different, just pop into your office, I have this question, blah, blah, blah. And also the idea of small talk, which I put in quotes here because it's not small at all. It's actually a really, really, really big deal. And all the stuff that has been said already about, asking people how they're doing, putting money in the emotional bank, all that stuff, that's all the example of the power of something like small talk. And Mr. Page, earlier you talked about how if you know that staff are sick and they are out for more than a few days, that you give them a call, right, to see how they're doing. But one of the things that you didn't mention is how you sort of created a system that allowed for that to happen. I think you said something about your secretary keeping track of that. I wonder if you could share a little bit about how you're able to make that happen, those follow-up phone calls.
Well, it kind of starts with having when I started as a deputy warden, you're a little bit closer in your daily efforts of dealing with the lieutenants and captains. And then I just noticed that people always kind of had a low level complaint about nobody ever checked on you, or nobody this, nobody that. And I thought, I was at church one Sunday and they was doing the special prayer list. And I thought about it and I said, well, why doesn't anybody do that for the employees? And this was like I think the first year that I made a deputy warden, 2009 it was. And basically what I started doing was I advised my secretary, I said, hey, I want to know who's out, if they're going out for a surgery or procedure, or someone has a car wreck. I want to find out about it 2 weeks later, because it can't be over at one time. So I made sure the lieutenants knew a security staff meeting. If you have someone that's going to be out for more than 2 or 3 days or so, I need to know about it so I can call them and check on them. And everybody just kind of started following suit. And it's amazing how many, I just made a couple of calls this week. It's amazing how that phone call helps people. One of my units, the HSA in the infirmary, she's an older lady, but she is positive for COVID. And I called her in the hospital when she got out of ICU last week, and she talked to me for over 30 minutes. Just happened to have somebody on the phone with her. It didn't stop me from doing what I was doing with emails and reading grievances or any of that stuff. But she's been in 2 units I've been at, Tucker unit and now the complex. But she talked to me like she'd been wanting to talk to somebody all day and nobody was calling her. So it's amazing when you take things away from humans, things get stronger when you get into other elements. Okay, it says questions, how did you maintain the calls during the height of the pandemic? HR helped with that. But in Arkansas, what we started doing was we started doing rapid tests every week, security and non-security rapid test. And if you're positive on a rapid test, then the infirmary does the PCR test on you to send off. It comes back in a few days. So unless somebody, and most people, that's where they find out, because, some people want to wear the mask, some people didn't wear the mask, and you had the whole vaccination stance issue. But that's what made it very easy to keep up with it during the height of the pandemic, was because over 90% of the people that found out they were positive, we told them, hey, you're positive on this weekly rapid test, and then the infirmary would come do the PCR test to send off. So we were putting them on the COVID leave, waiting out the outcome of their PCR test to come back, whether they could return to work, or yes, you were positive and you need to be off for the designated amount of days. So that really, it sounds like it can be a overcoming hard task to overcome, but it wasn't, because we controlled that. That's how our state did it, and that's what helped us. Because if you tell people, we tried it for I think a month. If you're positive on a rapid test, you need to go to an outside party and get a PCR test. Well, all of us in this forum know that once you tell someone you need them to go do something and bring it back to you, you're usually not going to get back what you need done, or they're going to go get another PCR rapid test from somebody just to confirm that without the mailing off. So we kind of took that back in under us. So now we know we control that factor. You can't just call us and say that you're off on COVID leave when we're offering that resource to you. So that allows us. That's like employees with issues. We use the employee assistance program, and at times, whether it's a mandatory referral for anger management or something that's going on with an employee, but it will cause a disciplinary action for me to get involved in, I do a mandatory referral to the employee assistance. Because what that does is it doesn't tell us your private information, but what it does do is let me know that if it's an alcohol issue, whatever it is, you're going as directed by those professionals. So that allows us to keep some form of knowledge and management of what's going on with it. But your secretaries are your best friend, and if anybody wanted to do that, I would just highly suggest that your next security meeting has your chief security covered, that warden so-and-so needs to know when people are off, and you would be surprised. You'd be surprised what it does when you those first 3 or 4. They start saying things like, "I knew you was gonna call." That's what I get now. No matter what unit I go to around the state, when you go as a warden and you move, it's kind of like, here's the file on Mel Williams. This is what he like, this is what he don't like, this is what he does, this is what he's not gonna do. So people wait on those, they expect those phone calls. And some of them, the situation is so tragic that they're dealing with, they might not even thought about it. And then when I call them, how you doing, this Superintendent Page, just call to check on you, blah, 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 blah. And then people cry on the phone. I mean, it's almost like a virtual experience, but they're on the phone. They're not on, Skype or anything like that, but you can hear it in the phone. Like that nurse the other day, I felt like I was in the hospital room with her. And she recalled how her dad passed away and talked about seeing the Lord, and then she felt she was that close to death. So being that outlet for people is what helps me, because in our positions, it's only so nice we can be. There's only so much we can do, because at the end of the day, who has to terminate people? Each one of us. Who has to take that disciplinary action because someone did something that was against policy, whether they tried to or didn't try to? That falls on us. So whether you have the biggest smile on the compound or the scowl, however your facial expression is, that falls on your shoulders. So that's why I try to control the narrative as much as I can, because there's so much that I can't control. There's thousands of bodies in here that are in here for different charges, doing what they want to do every day within the constraints of our rules and restrictions. And some of them respect staff, some of them disrespect staff. And there's so much of uncontrolled variable that you try to control what you put out there. Like Ms. Dawn was saying earlier when she brought that up, those relationships with staff. If you don't establish it, trust me, somebody else is going to establish it for you, and it's probably not going to be the narrative you want.
Yeah.
So it takes work.
Can I ask a follow-up question? I imagine, like, I'm trying to think if I were out sick or something was happening and I saw that my boss's boss was calling me. I could imagine some folks might feel like, oh gosh, I'm in trouble. Like they need me to come back, you know, and I'm wondering if you feel like the investments you're making in the emotional bank with people make it so that, and plus everyone knows that it's like your practice. So I wonder if that helps alleviate any anxiety folks might feel getting a call from, you know, the head honcho.
I think it does because like you spoke about the anxiety. When I first started doing it as a deputy warden, I was 25 years old. It was 2009. I was a young guy with big dreams, trying to do the right thing, right? And it was kind of unheard of then. They were like, "You're calling me for what?" But then as those years through deputy warden went on, and then in 16, when I become a head warden, I continued that process. So then it's more of an expected practice, expected best practice with me. Any unit I go to in the state of Arkansas, one page gonna call you and check on you. He's gonna speak to you. He's gonna ask you how you're doing. I might have a scowl on my face because somebody just told me some information that you explicit do not want to hear when you're the old one person. It happens to all of us. But when somebody comes to my door, I fix my face and smile. And I joke with them and say, sometimes that smile looks a little crooked, don't it? But it still come out smiling, don't it? Because I try to give them what they deserve, because it's not their fault what I'm hearing on the phone. It's not their fault if this unit what I'm getting told over at my work release center or what somebody did. It's not that person's fault. And too often, that's what I had a long counseling session with one of my majors yesterday, who's a 35-year veteran who does things, as we would say, the old way. I wasn't taught that way. We don't do it this way. We're being too soft on the staff. She's one of those types. And there are two sergeants that bust their butt to make her job easier, but she's pushing them away. So instead of a disciplinary action or anything like that, I got her and the deputy warden over her unit, and those two sergeants and one of my other majors, got three majors, got one of them from another unit to sit in. And I said, here's the round table. We're not doing as much as this as we need to. So I kind of forcefully showed them how we do the emotional bank thing. I told Major, I said, I want to make sure you have your roses while you're here, but I want to make sure that that trail is smooth for you, not bumpy. So you got to be able to listen to how people are taking this information that to you is nothing. Oh, I didn't mean it that way. But to somebody that's 2 or 3 ranks below you, it can be very damaging to their demeanor and wanting to be around you and shutting off from helping you. And you can't be a good chief without the good Indians doing work for you. You know, so we had that yesterday. That took about 2 hours of my day. So I ended up taking work home last night. But it was worth it because nobody got rolled up. All parties became at a commensurate level working together. And it was an understanding. She didn't mean that this way. They didn't mean that this way. And they all came together. But I had to set that platform up for that to happen. And Kevin Coran said I was actually told I could not call staff at home because it could be considered harassment. Well, that might be what Kevin, you still in Arizona? That might be the rule out there, but down here we call and check on them. It's not a but when we call them, it's never what's going on with your thing or how what's your medical status or anything with HIPAA, anything like that. It's purely, are you okay? Do you need anything? There have been times where staff are off for a week or so and they don't have a significant other. And they really need some orange juice or milk or something. We take up some money on an employee corp or something. I tell somebody get in that road in that extra vehicle, take it over there to them. And if you don't call them and you don't know that because they have too much pride to say, I need this, but I can't drive. And no one lives in the state with me. So I hate that where Kevin's at, but where we're at, we can call and they encourage you to check on your staff. Now, a lot of people don't do it as they need to, but it's an encouraged practice. Check on people.
Yeah. Thank you.
Make them feel wanted, because the new generation, that's a big thing with them, being wanted and needed.
Thank you.
Just a real quick comment on what Joe said. And Kevin, I think it's because Joe has established that culture within his institution or his units, and the staff know that he's calling for a positive reason. I can understand your reticence because that culture hasn't been established in your, maybe your entire department, and people could misconstrue your call as trying to check up on them because of whatever reason. But since Joe has that established within his units or his facility, it's looked at in a different way. Now, I think that that is something that we all could learn for, and all could establish that culture within our facilities, so that if the warden calls, they know, your staff will begin to know that it's just for, hey, how are you? I'm concerned about you, versus something wrong, like Jessica had mentioned.
Yeah.
Creating a culture of anxiety versus a culture of, hey, I'm just worried about you.
Hmm. Yeah, thank you. So one of the other qualities that we have touched on a little bit is inspiration, that a leader has to inspire people. So I'm curious for my panelists and for the folks in the chat, what inspires you? And how do you inspire others? What is the thing that gets you out of bed beyond a paycheck and a pension, right? What inspires you? And this is for folks in the chat and for any of my my great wardens who would like to talk about that.
Well, you have to like work, and you have to like people, because if you don't like people, you're in the wrong business.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and as being a warden or a superintendent, you can have great impact on people. You can have a very, very
Yeah.
positive impact on people. You know, and sometimes we forget that. Sometimes when we're in that chair and we're dealing with all kinds of fires and stuff, like Joe and Mike said, it's tough to see that. But really, you can have a great positive impact on people, and you need to learn how to use it to inspire other people.
Definitely.
Yeah, I'll share that one thing that inspires me, and I try to pass it on to others, is, you know, you leave a note for somebody unexpectedly, being specific on it, not a long note, but just leave a little card on somebody's desk, and, you know, thanking them or recognizing them on the good work they did in some project or task that you know that they performed. And I've received that, and I've passed that on, and it means a lot to me. Those that have received it, I recognize that they kept those notes. So I think inspiring people, you have to be encouraging, share your vision with them, show that, hey, look, we can make this happen. We make a difference. Each person is valued, and that you know, share with them their burden. So everybody's burden becomes a little bit lighter. So they know that you're there to help them, that they're there to help you. So that's what I find works, is that you're working together, you're encouraging one another, and you leave a little note that, again, lifts them up.
No.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Any other thoughts? I see Dana in the chat talks about being authentic. And that kind of gets also to, you know, honesty and integrity, and you know, people can smell BS, right? From a mile away. And so if you're talking about, you know, encouraging people and, you know, wanting people to share ideas and blah, 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 and then it comes and you don't listen or you don't follow up, as Don said, that's going to send a message too, right? And yeah, Don, you have to care. Absolutely. You have to care. 100%.
I think
And then
also
finally,
that
sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm just saying that I think that your enthusiasm and your upbeat opinion about things and how you want them to go and how positive that they can be very infectious. And when you're out there walking and talking and really being authentic with staff and wanting to know how they're doing and really engaging. I mean, we all know that we call it walking and talking in this business, but when you do that for real, and when you go to change things, like in today's world that's changing very quickly, New York State, we're changing some things, and legislature has made some unbelievable changes in how we manage our correctional facilities. We still have to make those changes happen. They're not going to be popular, but honestly, the way we're putting it out there, we're really just we're doing different things with the incarcerated people. So when we're out there totally involved ourselves as the superintendent and the warden, and people know that we care and we're involved and we want their input, it becomes infectious. You get buy-in and you get change in how things are done. If your staff have buy-in and you're able to, steer them in the right direction and get them to be involved in the process, it makes a big impact on how others will respond to where you want to go. And I think it makes their career, their day go a little bit better when they know you're interested in what they're doing, what they want to, what the input they want to have. So you can be an infectious person in a positive way.
Totally. Thank you. And then finally, the last quality to talk about is challenging the status quo, right? And I mentioned earlier that strong leaders are defined by their ability to see beyond what is and towards what's possible. And I think, language like challenging the status quo, that is very advocacy type language, to use that word. It can feel a little too radical or revolutionary or something like that. And I just want to say that, for the purposes of this conversation, we're not talking about revolution, we're talking about evolution, right? We're talking about challenging the way things are, seeing the things that need to change and making the steps towards that change. And Eric, I'm gonna pick on you for a second, because some time ago, you said something that, for myself as an advocate and a lot of my advocacy colleagues, we very frequently say that we want to work ourselves out of a job, right? Our vision is that the jobs that we have won't be necessary anymore, right? Because people won't be harmed. There won't be sexual abuse, for example, right? That's not something I ever expected someone in a corrections leadership position to say. And you said that to me some time ago. You said, I picked this profession to work myself out of a job. Can you talk a little more about what that means to you, and what that looks like, what that looks like for your vision?
I think it's, a simple mission statement that we have here in Virginia is that, we're in the business of helping people to be better. And, it starts with, you, me, the individual that's looking back at you in the mirror. And so as we struggle to better ourselves, we allow those that we have stewardship over to struggle, to get better, to stretch. It's much like faith is. Faith is, stretching for something that's unseen, but it draws us, it energizes us. We know it's something we want to reach for. And so, that's the way I see every person is valuable, significant. And as we treat them that way, we can see ourselves one day that they will be passing that on, and we won't need prison. So, that's the vision, is that we get people to believe in themselves and that they know they're of value, and that they, again, pass that on to, offspring, to family members, friends, etc. It's contagious that we all respect each other as valuable individuals, and that we're striving to work together, knowing that we're imperfect, but we can improve with each other's help. That's what it's about.
Yeah. And I think, and that goes back to that emotional bank, right? That we're all invested in each other succeeding, right? Like other people's success is my success too, especially if I, have a relationship with that person and I'm invested in that person. Mel, you said something too about courage one time we were having a conversation about this. Like, I think I'm putting you on the spot because I didn't put this in your notes, but would you mind sharing about talking a little bit about courage and how it relates to leadership versus management?
I mean, as a ward or superintendent, you're in charge of your facility, but you also have to stand up for your employees. You know, central office they rule the roost. They give the policy procedures, they tell you what to do, but sometimes things need to be said. Sometimes you got to make that phone call to central office and say, hey, you know, have you thought about this? You know, when you looked at this, what about that? You really have to show courage to your employees that you're willing to stand up for them when the timing is right. You know, staff needs to know you care about them. You know, if something bad happens, they need to know that you're going to be there for them. I used to tell people a lot of times if something bad happened, I would call the employee down to my office and close the door and say, hey, what happened? And my responsibility was to get to the bottom of it and put the employee back on his way instead of throwing the people right into the disciplinary matter, which sometimes we had to do. You really need to stand up for your employees. You need to have courage. Sometimes somebody's going to come into your facility and they're going to go after some of your employees or go after you or whatever. And you need to take a stand sometimes. Now, I'm not saying do crazy stuff. You know, we all work for the commissioner or the director or the secretary. That's understood. But sometimes things happen, and as a person in charge of a facility, you have to show courage and do the right thing and make that phone call or address that person in a professional manner, you know, not a crazy person, and say, hey, you know, have you thought about this? Or you know, that policy and procedure that, you know, we're going to follow, but, you know, when you wrote it up or whoever wrote it, did they think about what would happen to this or this person? So at least the staff in your facility and the inmates in your facility know that, in fact, you're trying to look out for the operation and trying to look out for their welfare. Yeah, you need to have courage. And courage will separate a manager from a leader. A leader has courage. A manager follows directions. And sometimes it's a lonely job. Sometimes when you take those stands, you won't be appreciated by anybody because they don't know what you did. But in your heart, in your mind, and in the eyes of God, if you did the right thing. You have to have courage.
Well said. Thank you. Any other thoughts on this before we start to wrap things up and go to Q&A? Okay.
I just say are we okay?
Yeah, you're good. Go for it.
I agree wholeheartedly with what Mel said. Sometimes policies and procedures that are set have been set a long time ago, and you as a warden or superintendent see that that policy procedure really isn't working for your staff, for what you're trying to do in your facility. You've got to have the courage to stand up and question it. And even if it's decisions that central office have made, you need to make yourself heard, because the status quo, those same things that have been around for a long time, if they're not working for you, have the courage to question them. Sometimes you can get away with doing things a little bit differently at your own facility, and that sets the culture for the facility. Sometimes there are policies and procedures that you know you can't tackle yourself, and you have to get permission from your headquarters. Ask those questions. Even if you get an answer that says, hey, it's got to be the same, you've got to have the courage to ask, because really, your staff, your incarcerated population are counting on you to do those things as a leader. So you've got to at least ask the question.
And it can be scary. But as I look at the video, I see Pat Caruso nodding her head. She ran the Department of Corrections in Michigan. And I know Gary Moore is online. He ran Ohio. He's thinking the same. These are leaders who will accept your input. You know, you're going to do what they tell you to do, but almost all commissioners and leaders that I know with the CLA, they'd be willing to take those calls as long as you're respectful and do your homework before you make the call.
Absolutely. And I bet that emotional bank comes into play here too, right? And how that call is going to be perceived by whoever you're talking to, and how you've interacted with them in the past. Yeah. So this is kind of a little preview for what our next leadership summit will be. We've talked a lot about a vision and creating a leadership vision, and that's it's a little bit of a kumbaya thing, right? Like, what does that even mean? When I think about, my own sort of vision personally, professionally, I try to pretend there are no barriers, right? Like if money, staffing, if all of that were not an issue, what would I want to see, right? That's sort of what I see as the first question to thinking about what a leadership vision is. And so if folks have any thoughts on this and they want to share in the chat, what do they want their facility to be like in 5 years, 10 years, or even longer? Please feel free to share those with us. If you're not sure and you're like, oh, I've never even thought about that, that's okay too. But that's a question I would encourage folks to continue thinking about. What do they want their facility, their workplace to be like when they pass it on to the next person, right? What do they want to see that's different? And I don't know if any of my panelists have any thoughts on that as well.
I would
Creating, oh, go ahead.
sorry.
No, sorry, you're good, please.
Say, you may not even want to look at your facility in 5 years or 10 years. Depending on what's going on at your facility, you may want to look at the next 6 months or the next quarter. Because depending on the problems that you may encounter or the issues that you have going right now, maybe you have a problem with suicides, or you have a portion of your population that you feel is just a problem, and you want to set a goal to decrease the amount of use of force that's used, or the amount of mental health crisis calls that you have. It might just be a quarter or 6 months or a year, or you may work yourself into a year if you're able to set a vision for those more immediate things.
Mm-hmm.
So I just wanted to say it might be something. Your increments could be smaller depending on what's happening at your facility, but never lose sight that you are the one that can get you through the mire by having a vision of where you want to be, because the staff will then follow. Mm-hmm. What your priorities are in that vision, your staff and your incarcerated population will follow.
Wonderful, thank you. And these are just some of the steps to consider when you're thinking about what that leadership vision will be. And I appreciate what you said too, that a vision could be something far off in the future, but it could also be a very short term, like what you want to see in 6 months or a year or a quarter or whatever. There's no sort of limit to that. But again, these are some of the things to consider, and some of the things that we'll be dissecting in our next leadership summit that will be coming up. We have about a little over 10 minutes for questions, and I must admit I have not really been monitoring the chat. So if folks have posted questions, my partner here, Nicole, if you wouldn't mind sharing what some of those questions are, if there have been any that have been shared with us.
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. So we do have a couple of questions for our speakers today. The first is actually came in before the summit began, but how are you keeping staff motivated to continue to work overtime without an end in sight for the staffing shortages? And I guess that could be for our task force members or anyone really joining us today.
Yeah, and if any of the folks who haven't spoken yet, our attendees want to chime in, please feel free to do so.
Staffing is something no one has the answer for.
I know.
It's such a terrible situation all the way across the country. I mean, my limited experience with when we're down on staff is as staff, you need to inspire staff the best you can. You need to be out there with them every day. They need to see that you're working as hard as they are.
Mm.
And, and sometimes you have to recognize when people are failing, because they're working too many days or too many hours. You have to have a good program to recognize that the staff is sometimes hurting. Sometimes you need to give that extra day off, change a shift, look out for your staff. But my experience has been if staff sees you working hard, you're highly visible, you're sitting down there and say, I know we don't have the answer, but together we're going to get through this. We're all going to make it. It doesn't cost you anything to give, like Joe would say, your personal commitment to people. You go into your emotional bank and inspire people by your own work ethic, by showing them, you need to come in early. You need to stay a little bit late. I used to do a thing when we had winter storms. I'd go in early every day and I would answer the phones and people would say, hey, I can't make it to work today. And I would say, hey, where do you live? I said, I think I need to pass your house this morning. And we would laugh about it. I'd say, well, be safe, but try and make it to work. So they knew I wasn't going to scream on them, but everybody would get a big laugh about it. Then in fact, hey, the boss took my call this morning. It wasn't Sergeant Jones. He told me to come to work because he passed my house. So yeah, it's people need to feel comfortable with you. And even in the worst situations, a lot of us have had bad things happen. I've had some terrible things happen in my facilities where we went through staff assaults, homicide, and bad things can happen sometimes. But staff need to know who you are. They need to know what you're going to do. You're going to stand up and look after them. And even in the worst, I know when Kevin out there in Arizona, he tells me how terrible short-staffed he is. He's 50% of staff going into shift. I mean, I don't know how you do that. I don't know what magician is that, but I think the best you can do is inspire people and try and go out there. And with staffing, there's Kevin staff and NAWS is conducting a staffing thing right now. We're going to write a position paper. We're talking about everybody across the country, how they can address staff. There's no easy answers, but as a warden and superintendent, your best opportunity is to show people who you are, inspire them.
Yeah, and I appreciate what you said too about no one wants to feel like they're working harder than their boss, right? That's like such a demoralizing feeling, right? So I think anyone in any field can really understand that for sure. Any other thoughts or on this topic?
I think that's when, in piggybacking on what Mel said, that's when you really show you care, and your staff that you've got that emotional bank with, that you've established that rapport with, know that you authentically care. I know some of the little things that I've done when it's a hot day. I know it sounds silly, but amazing how staff appreciate it. Hot day, I made lemonade and took lemonade out to the staff because some of the units didn't have air conditioning. Well, none of the units have air conditioning, but some of the correctional officers' offices didn't have air conditioning. I brought them lemonade, or the staff that are posted in the yard. Just little things like that. I would come in on all watches and talk to staff. On first watch, I'd come in. And of course, they all knew that I was there because as soon as I walked in through the front, central control said, "The duck is on the pond." They all knew I was there, but I wasn't there to check on them for negative reasons. I was there to ask, "How are you doing?" So the emotional bank, all the things that we've been talking about today really pertain to when you have issues like short staffing, making people have mandatory overtime. If the culture in your facility is such that they know, like Mel said, you're working as hard as they are and that you care, everybody can get through it. It's not easy. It goes back to the courage.
Yeah, I mean, that seems like such a small gesture, but for reference, the facility Don was warden at is in inland Southern California, and I have been there on a very hot day. And I think even just that gesture shows that you acknowledge that there's a challenge here and that it's uncomfortable and no one wants to be in that heat. So you're acknowledging it and you show that you're thinking about them. I think that's really powerful. All right, we still got a few minutes left. Any other questions?
Yeah, sure. There was one more. How do you keep the vision and focus while working on the day-to-day? I'm guessing day-to-day operations.
Yeah. Any of my esteemed panelists have thoughts on that?
You let your managers deal with the day-to-day. Because that's what they're there for. I know in our hierarchy, when I was a warden, I had a chief deputy warden. They were the manager of the facility. That didn't mean that I didn't know what was going on, because the chief deputy warden would report back to me, but I didn't have to have hands-on on absolutely everything. I got the time to plan. I got the time to think. And that's where vision comes from. I cut out the time in my schedule to make rounds. Trust, but verify. So delegation is the key there.
Yeah. Thank you. Any other thoughts on that?
It's really a juggling act. More and more as time goes on, we are pinned to this office, to this desk. It's ungodly the amount of reports that now have to be done after incident. So I understand that question, and we kind of have to reinvent ourselves regularly. And when you have a big facility, the bigger it is, the more difficult it is. And when your staff are out, especially your key staff that are out, your deputy superintendents and things like that, it means that you're on point for all of that. I think it's just pushing through, knowing what, like I have a couple of projects that I'm working on now that are, one of them is an addiction project, which is affects the population, also affects staff, and it affects people out on the street. But it's relevant to why some people come into our system, addiction. So it's a pet project of mine. I've been doing it with a number of people from a big network. We continue to move in that direction to do it. It doesn't mean that my duties as the superintendent get any easier. I think after a while, what's important, what's not important, what you can push off your desk and what you can't push off your desk, but it's kind of like running a 15-minute mile. Now you're running a 10-minute mile. Sooner or later, you're running a 5-minute mile and you don't even realize it. It's not going to get any better, I don't believe. It's just you have to redefine how you do what you do, and how, what you can delegate, what you can't, what you have to have hands-on that's going to make an impact in your facility. And that is the trick. The harder it gets out in there, and the less staff you have, the more visible you have to be. And at the same time, it gets harder for you. So visibility, contact, showing your vision, being upbeat, being involved, being current. When these staff see that, they know you're on it. And there's nothing better than having a boss walk around, being upbeat, going through, patting your staff on the back, knowing the most recent use. We just got 3.5 pounds of K2 in my package room. This is my officer's 20th bust. Went down there myself, watched her weigh it, had one of my local guys come in, take a picture of her, put her up on the wall, gave her a little attaboy. Just things like that. It just never ends. You got to be on it. You have to enjoy what you do as a leader, and know that your actions make an impact on people. They could be negative or they can be positive. And like everybody has said individually in our own ways, whether it's, I love the one statement about, the process of the emotional bank. And I think we're all kind of saying the same thing. We're just saying it a little bit differently and doing it a little bit differently for our culture, for our facility. And if it's not working for you, that means maybe you should, take a couple of these thoughts and think how you can make it happen. But the reality of it is that an involved, an impactful, and a knowledgeable boss that is thankful to his staff and humbled for his position or her position is somebody who is going to get some change and some impact out of both your staff and your incarcerated people.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. What a wonderful statement to end our summit on. Another thing that you can do is to save the date for our next leadership summit, which will be Thursday, January 20th in 2022, which boggles my mind. I want to encourage everyone who's here to please sign up for our project newsletter. The link to do so is in the chat right now. We send out monthly newsletters, so your inbox won't get clogged, but you will get reminders for the upcoming leadership summit, including a registration link, as well as continued thoughts of wisdom from our panelists here. Another note is when you click out of this meeting, a screen will pop up with a really short evaluation. If you have a moment to fill that out, we would love to know your thoughts, and there's also an opportunity to suggest some future topics if you'd like to see us talk about something else. But again, I want to thank my panelists. I want to thank our attendees. I want to thank my fellow Just Attention International staff for being here. Really, really appreciate your time. Yeah, thank you again so much.
Take care, everyone.
Have a great day, everybody.